Okay, guys, you should have out a clean piece of notebook paper. Get your notes titled and dated. We are going to start talking today about all things linear. And more specifically, we are going to talk about the rate of change and the slope with linear graphs and points. So rate of change and slope can be used interchangeably. Rate of change is usually when we're talking about a table, and slope is usually when we are talking about a graph or 2 points. But the rate of change or slope is the change in the dependent variable over the change in the independent variable. And this should all be a review from last year. You guys did a linear unit on all things slope last year. So hopefully this is a review for you. So the rate of change is the change in the dependent variable over the change in the independent variable. Okay? And we talked about the dependent and independent variable before. Those are different names for input or output or X or Y. But it's important to remember that the change in the dependent variable is with the Y's and the change in the independent variables with the X. So when you write your rate of change or when you write your slope, it's always Y over X, which is a little bit backwards from, when we put things in a table and stuff, it's always X first. Not here, it's always going to be Y over X. Okay, so with the slope of a line, there are 4 different types. Hopefully you remember these, but get these down. Draw little mini graphs on your paper. The first one is a positive line. That's going to be increasing, going up and to the right. The second one is a negative line. It's going to be decreasing, going down and to the right. The next one is going to be a zero slope line. It's perfectly flat, going horizontally. And then the fourth one is an undefined line. It is perfectly vertical. So these are the 4 different types of slope that you're going to see. It's going to be important that you can name all 4 of the different types and identify what type of slope each graph has. Guys, if you need this, you can always pause it and get the rest copied down. I will want to see your notes tomorrow when I come back. Okay, so then we're going to go through what is the slope of a line. You guys want to remember that it's always going to be the change in the Y's over the change in the X. Okay? So we're going to, Y, the change in Y goes up and down, and the change in X goes left and right. Okay? It's important to pay attention what kind of change it is and what kind of line it is. So the first thing I notice about this line is that it's positive. It goes up and to the right. So my final numerical answer for slope should be a positive number. Okay, so change in Y. So I'm going to go up 2, and I'm going to go to the right 3. So my slope is 2 over 3. So what slope is telling us is that's the steepness of our graph. If I continue that pattern up 2 and over 3, I should hit my line every time. Or I could reverse that and go down 2 and left 3 and hit the line again. And I do. So that pattern continues the entire length of that line, because that line goes on forever. All right, let's do another one. All right, the first thing that I noticed about this is that it's a negative line. It's going downhill, down and to the right. It's a negative slope. So my final answer should be a negative answer. You can go either way, but I'm going to go from this first dot up here and count down first. 1, 2, 3, 4, and over 5. Guys, going down 4 was a negative movement. So that's where we get our negative slope from. So I get negative 4 over 5. You could also write that negative out front if you want. You could have gone the other way and gone up 4, and then going left would be a negative movement. So that's where your negative comes into play. Hopefully we remember this some from last year. Okay, on this one, they didn't give us the dots on our graph, so we have to find the perfect points. So the perfect points is where the graph line intersects with a intersection of an XY value. So I always start at the top of my line and just go down my line until I see if it meets up with an XY intersection. And I just continue down the line until I find, now we only need 2, but sometimes there are more than 2. So there were actually 4 on that line. I noticed that this has a negative slope. And then I'm going to count it. So I'm going to start at this first dot and count 1, 2, 3. So it down 3 and right 2. Guys, on your homework, you will need to show me your counting on the graph. Otherwise, I won't count it correct. You got to show me all of your work. All right, slope of this line. So positive line. It's going up and to the right. So then I'm going to count up 2, right 5. So 2 over 5. Again, I hope you guys remember this from last year. That should be a major review for you. Okay. All right, so another way to find the slope of a line on a graph is to use 2 of the points on the line and calculate it mathematically. So what we're going to do now is instead of them giving us a graph, they're going to give us 2 points, and we're going to have to mathematically calculate it, okay? So the key thing to remember is that it's change in y over the change in x. So guys, the change in math, hopefully you know what kind of math problem that would be. If I want to know the change in something, I'm going to do subtraction. So we always say y minus y over x minus x. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through these points and I'm going to label them x, y, x, y. So I'm going to go ahead and put the big fraction bar and put the 2 subtraction signs there. Because when you plug in those numbers, those subtraction signs have to stay put. So if a y value is negative, the negative has to still be entered into the problem. So my 2 y values are 0 and negative 2. So I'm just going to plug those in order on the top. So I got 0 minus a negative 2. For the x's, I'm going to take the first x minus the second x. And then you just have to complete the math problem. So 0 minus a negative 2 is a positive 2. And negative 1 minus 3 is a negative 4. Now, the same rules still apply. If you can simplify it, now guys, it cannot be a mixed number. It can be improper, but it cannot be mixed. So 2 over negative 4 is the same thing as negative 1 over negative 2. So what that tells you about your line is that since it's negative, it's going to be going down and to the right. If I graph those 2 points, that's what our line would look like. And then I would go down 1 box and over 2 to get to every dot. And I'm going a little bit quickly here, so if you need to go back and watch any part of this, please do. Oops, wrong way. All right, so let's do another one. So again, change in y's, so y minus y over x minus x. So I'm going to label these x, y, x, y. I always put my math, my fraction bar, my 2 subtraction signs. And I'm going to take the first y, which is 3, minus the second y, which is negative 1. And I'm going to take the first x minus the second x on the bottom. And then I complete the math. So 3 minus a negative 1 is a positive 4. And 1 minus 4 is a negative 3. And that cannot be simplified, so that's our slope. Guys, it is important when you're mathematically calculating it that you leave the negative with the number that was negative, okay? Otherwise, your math would not be correct. So your work has to match your final answer. All right, let's do another one. So xy, xy. If you want, you can pause the video and see if you do it correctly. So negative 4 minus a negative 4. And 3 minus 7. So negative 4 minus a negative 4 is 0. And 3 minus 7 is a negative 4. So guys, when there's a 0 in our answer, it's either a 0 line or an undefined line, okay? When the 0 is on top, it's going to equal a 0 slope. So what we're going to have to say here is that this slope is 0. When the 0 is on bottom, it's just like division. If we tried to divide by 0, we can't do it. So with an undefined line, we have to think about, can we walk that line? And since an undefined line is perfectly vertical, we would not be able to walk on it, okay? So when the 0 is on bottom, it's going to be an undefined line, and we'll have to write that for our final answer. So real quick, xy, xy. So I have 2 minus a negative 4 over negative 8 minus a negative 8. So I get 6 over 0. So when the 0 is on bottom, and you can type this in, 6 divided by 0, and your calculator is going to tell you that there's an error. So that should tell you that this is an undefined line, and that's going to be our final answer. You might see it written like that also. I know that was really, really quick, but all of this, again, should be a review for you. So if you need to go back and watch any part of that, go ahead and do so. But when you're done, you need to raise your hand so that your notes can be checked and so you can get your worksheet.